Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to week number 27 of the WiggyWam Get Your Property Questions Answered webinars. We're doing this every single week where we take a bunch of your most pertinent property-related questions and we answer them as best as we possibly can during the time that we have available. Now, that's whether you are a buyer or a seller or a tenant or a landlord or a first-time buyer or a would-be landlord or an estate agent, a letting agent, a chartered surveyor, a solicitor or a mortgage broker or a removals company. In fact, anything connected with the property industry, we like to take the time to answer your particular questions during the course of this next hour or so. And I want to kick off this week's webinar by asking you what your top three pain points are in your current business right now. So if you're an agent or a solicitor or a surveyor or any of the other property professionals connected with the industry, as we've just outlined, what are the top three pain points that you're experiencing right now in your business? Now, for some, it has been a challenging market over the course of the first quarter of this year as the market is beginning to slow down, things are beginning to change. Things aren't selling quite as easily as they once did, or we're having to introduce price reductions or have those uncomfortable conversations with people. Where the agent has valued it at one price and now it's having to be reduced down to less than what the seller thought it was worth. Or maybe there are issues with getting deals agreed and then getting them or keeping them together all the way through to completion. Maybe there's issues with communication between solicitors and estate agents, or maybe you're a solicitor who's absolutely fed up to the back teeth of being hassled every week by estate agents and you wish somebody would put a solution together to solve that sort of problem. I really want to hear from you as to what your particular pain points are that you're dealing with, and maybe we might have one or two solutions tucked up our sleeve for you. So send those through to me, please. The email address to send them to is happytohelp@wiggywam.co.uk. That's happytohelp@wiggywam.co.uk. And if you just put the title as pain points, and we'll look at each one of those that come through, and we'll provide you with a custom solution to your current pain points that you're struggling with and dealing with right now. We're offering that as a bit of a value add to our WiggyWam community. And for those of you that are, struggling with some challenges, because what I find, guys and girls, is that sometimes we can be in our own little world, we can be dealing with certain problems and stresses in our life that, on one hand, we kind of wish those stresses would just go away and allow us to focus on the task in hand, right? And sometimes without a fresh pair of eyes looking at a situation, then it can become very, very difficult to solve. And I'm sure you've seen this yourself. If you're into DIY or something of that nature and you've done work on a home, and for some reason that work hasn't turned out quite the way you thought it would do, and then you call in a professional and they look at it through a different pair of eyes, or even a friend or a family member can look at something from a different pair of eyes and they'll come up with a solution. And that's not to say that we have all the answers, of course, but it just might be that we've got a little bit of extra experience in different areas where we can cast a light on what those pain points might be that you're dealing with, and also then how to best deal with them going forward. So shoot me your top three pain points that you're dealing with. We might even send out a poll to our audience and the people on our mailing list. So look out for that in your email inbox. We may well send out that survey asking you what your top three pain points are. But for those of you that have got them, that you're struggling with, don't suffer in silence. Get those out on an email right now. Send it through to us, happytohelp@wiggywam.co.uk. And we'll review every single one of those and respond back accordingly. And hopefully there'll be some really cool stuff that will come out of that will add value to other people within the community as well. So just wanted to get started with that one this week, guys and girls, and let's get on with today's questions. So question number one comes in here from Jill. Hi there, Jill. Thanks for being part of the amazing WiggyWam community. And Jill says, I've recently moved home and the whole process has been really quite stressful because my buyer has been very demanding. Although we completed on Friday, we physically moved out a day before so we could get the house deep cleaned, as the buyer said they were going to rent it out. Now he's been in touch saying there's some snagging that needs to be done and some areas of the property that need further cleaning. Where do I stand on this? I've done my best to help him out, but he seems so ungrateful and it's going to cost me money to have the house cleaned again. Do I have to? Well, that's a great question there, Jill, and thank you for submitting that. And it's great to see that you've been so proactive in, getting your property completely deep cleaned and, getting it ready to hand over. You sound very much like my partner, bless her. When we moved out of our last house, she was frantically running around, giving everything a really solid clean before we handed it back. And I thoroughly appreciate what you're doing there to provide a really good, tidy, clean home to hand it over. And to be honest with you, that's not the usual thing. I've seen some interesting states of properties that we've taken over the years, where people have just quite. It's almost, some houses can be like the Marie Celeste, where people have just abandoned stuff and just cleared off, and they don't want anything out of it. Other houses can be, they've been. They've moved all the furniture out, but you can see where that furniture's been because of all the cobwebs on the wall and all that sort of thing. So the fact that you've gone to the effort of deep cleaning everything and then handing it over in a clean state, to me, speaks volumes about the person that you are, Jill. So what I would say to you here in response to your question is that unless there is something that you guys have specifically agreed between the two of you as part of the actual legal contract, in terms of the sale and the purchase, then as far as I'm concerned, it would really appear that your buyer doesn't have a leg to stand on and is kind of tying things on a little bit to get you to, do some extra cleaning or do some extra, as he called it, snagging. I'm not sure quite what snagging he would be referring to, on the basis that I'm presuming you haven't done any refurbishment work or repair work to the property since you, as part of the sale. So snagging would only normally come into play where, a property has been refurbished and there's been tradesmen in and they've done some building work, and then it's kind of like the tidying up jobs that need finishing. So I think it's a bit cheeky of him suggesting that, there's some snagging here that you need to sort out. But I would suggest that, as I say, unless there's anything specifically in the contract between the two of you, this guy hasn't absolutely got a leg to stand on, and you don't have to go back and deep clean the house. You don't have to go back and address all this snagging. I would perhaps put a quick call into your solicitor just to double check and verify that there hasn't been anything agreed that you might not be aware of. You should be aware of it, obviously, because that's what you were part of as going through the contractual negotiations with your solicitor and whatever was agreed through the estate agent. But I would suggest that quick phone call will put your mind at rest completely. The solicitor will be able to verify that you're not required to do all of this extra work, and actually this guy or who's buying your properties or who's bought your property now is completely trying it on, and you can let them sail off into the sunset with their new property, and you don't have to worry about it ever again, and you can put this down to a bad experience. And then hopefully you'll be settled in your new home, and you can focus on that instead of worrying about what's gone in the past. So hope that helps, Jill. Nice and fairly straightforward one to deal with there. Talk to your solicitor, see what they've got to say, and then from then on go further forward. All right. So thank you for that question, Jill. Moving on to question number 2, comes in here from Fiona. Fiona says, hi there, Fiona. Thank you for being part of the amazing WiggyWam community. And Fiona's question says, my husband wants to put my name onto the deeds of our house now that the mortgage is all paid off. Which form do we need to use, because the land registry website is as clear as mud? Well, thank you for that question, Fiona. Interesting that you're in that scenario now where your husband wants to add you to the title deeds of the house. That can be quite useful for things like, God forbid, in the future, inheritance, tax planning, and all the rest of it, if the house is owned in joint names. I believe off the top of my head, Fiona, that the form that you're going to want to use on this one is what's known as the TR1, that's Tango Romeo 1 form, which will be on the Land Registry website. I think if you go to, if you just go to a search engine and type TR1 form, it'll come up, and that should be the one that you go through and complete. There are, on the government website, there is some explanatory notes as well that accompany that form. So don't feel like you've got to go through it all on your own. Just look at the explanatory notes there and see whether or not those answer all of the questions that you have. if you're getting a little bit sort of bogged down by the whole process, and you want to be sure that you don't make any mistakes here, Fiona, what I would suggest that you do is we might have one or two solicitors that could have a look over this for you and make sure that it's okay without charging you an absolute fortune, but also give you the peace of mind and confidence that you need to know that the job's being done correctly. You may also benefit from a conversation, depending upon the value of the property, depending upon the value of the overall estate that you're looking at, whether or not there are some other tax planning issues that you might want to take into account. That would be something that you would need to investigate further as to whether or not adding you to the property or not is going to cause you any further complications as far as tax planning is concerned. I can't imagine it will, but it's always worth asking the question just before you do this, because it could be this innocent thing where you think, I'll just sign this form, I'll just get my name registered against this title of the property, and depending upon the other assets or the wider assets that you have, that may or may not then have an impact further down the line when it comes to a little bit of tax planning. But I'm only throwing that in there, Fiona, as something to think about, because unfortunately none of us are getting out of life alive. That's one of the unfortunate realities, I suppose, of being human, is that one day the final curtain closes and then we then have to hand over our assets to children or charities or whoever we deem should benefit from them. So just have that at the back of your mind. It may or may not be relevant, but I just thought I'd mention it as you've asked the question, Fiona. So hope that one helps you, and good luck with that planning process. And if, as I say, if you do need any help with a solicitor looking over that, let me know. Send me an email. Happy to help at WiggyWam.co.uk. That's happy to help at WiggyWam.co.uk. And I'll ask one of my expert legal bods to give you a call and just run through everything with you, just so your mind can be completely at peace there. All right. Thanks for that question, Fiona. Wishing you all the best of luck with that. And let us know if we can do anything else further to help you. All right, perfect. Moving on, question number 3 comes in from Stu. Hi there, Stu. Thanks for being part of the amazing WiggyWam community and for putting your question across to us here. So Stu asks, if you were to do a refurb on a property, would you fit an air source heat pump? I know the cost of installation would be more than a gas boiler, but surely over time it's going to work out cheaper. If mains gas wasn't available, it would make the decision... Sorry, if mains gas wasn't available, it would make the decision easier perhaps, but I'm just wondering if it's worth the investment, bearing in mind the stricter requirements on property EPCs in the future. Okay, Stu, well, that's a great question. Thanks for sending it through to us. This is an interesting question, looking at an air source heat pump in terms of heating the property, and whether or not there's a trade-off in terms of a little bit more upfront investment in the actual technology of putting that into the property and all the installation work, which I understand is quite substantial, or just going down the usual route of a gas central heating boiler and radiators, etc. Now, I'm just going back quite a few years now, Stu. I looked into this quite a bit when I was a surveyor, because when I just a little bit of background, when I qualified as a surveyor, one of my dissertations that I wrote was around the whole idea of SIPS panels for building houses, and the point of me mentioning that was all about this idea of renewable technologies and higher levels of insulation, and the fact that houses could literally be built in a factory and then bolted together on site. So panels would be built in a factory. There'd be in essence a big slab of insulation between two pieces of plywood, almost, for want of a better description, and then those would be transported to site, built. You could build a house in a day, and then obviously you would put the brickwork skin on the outside, put the roof on, etc. And we also looked at a number of different technologies that would go in there, such as solar, such as wind power, and also ground source heat pumps and similar sort of technology. And at the time, although this is going back quite a few years now, at the time, in my view, the technology wasn't quite there to make it worth the overall investment, in my humble opinion. And I think I haven't heard a lot of great things about air source heat pumps in terms of complications, in terms of overall running costs, in terms of, shall we say, the difference between the marketing literature i.e. this is a great technology and this is what it will do for you and this is how much it will save on your energy bills, etc., versus the actual practical reality of installing that sort of a system in a UK-based property. And as a consequence, my gut reaction, Stu, would be to weigh up a number of different things as part of answering this question for you. First of all, are you doing the property to live in yourself, or are you doing it for a buy-to-let or a flip? For example, if it was a property you were doing for yourself, I would spend a lot more time on answering this question about whether or not it's worth this upfront cost to put this air source heat pump in versus the overall running cost. But from what I'm hearing, you're probably going to spend a lot more on additional heating during the colder months than you are during the summer months, and that could be a detriment to you in the future. Okay. So that would be the sort of first approach I'd look at, is whether or not this refurb is for something I'm going to live in, or whether it's going to be something that I'm going to flip on or rent out. And quite honestly, when you have these sort of new technologies coming in, a lot of people aren't really familiar with them. So you kind of need somebody who's a little bit passionate about what you're introducing into the property in order for it to make sense to them and then go, oh yeah, okay, I can see the benefit of having that. And the reason I mention that is because it might affect future resale value, because if your buyers are coming in and they're looking at this property and going, okay, air source heat pump, not sure what that is, and then they go to a search engine, start looking online, looking at reading reviews on forums and what have you, they're probably going to come across the same sort of information that I've been exposed to, which probably looks more negative than positive, if I'm honest. And as a consequence, they're going to say, well, okay, there's an additional cost now for me to replace that technology with a gas boiler, et cetera, et cetera. Now, with an eye to the future, I understand that the requirements around EPCs have now been put back by 3 years. So I think that there was a requirement that in 2025, every rented property needed to be at an EPC level of, I believe it was C or above, right? And that has now been put back by 3 years because the government are worried about not being able to hit target and effectively the additional devastating impact that would have on the UK housing stock, which is already shrinking because a lot of landlords are getting out of the game. Okay. And so the requirements around gas boilers, there's been a lot of sort of hype and speculation and talk about gas boilers being banned in properties, and then we're all going to move towards electric boilers, and somehow electric boilers are going to be far more efficient than running on gas. Again, not quite sure what that's all about, but these are the sorts of things that are possibly changing. And whether or not we do get to a point where properties are more energy efficient, I think the passive house standard, which was, I'm not sure whether it was Swedish or German technology or that created the name passive house, but they got to a point where a property maintained its overall temperature from a mixture of solar gain and also from the heat of the bodies of the people that were occupying it. And I think if you can hit that standard, then all well and good. But I think the practicalities are, Stu, that it comes down to the issues of maintaining air tightness within a building structure when you're either doing a new build or in your case, as you're doing a refurb. And when you're working with older style properties to do a refurb, there's a very high chance that you won't quite get the air tightness that you need to achieve these sorts of higher passive house standards. And that can create problems in terms of drafts, in terms of an increased number of air changes, which leads to a decreased effectiveness on things like your air source heat pump. So I know that's probably been a bit of a long-winded and meandering answer, if you like, Stu, but I just wanted to share a little bit of background to let you know that, this is something that I have looked at quite intensively over the years. And, I don't get me wrong, I'd love it if technology would be there from a point of view that we could all heat our homes via solar, and we'd all have our hot water from solar, and we'd all have electricity from solar, and we wouldn't need to plug into the grid, and we could all be effectively off grid. I think, that holds amazing promise, but I just don't think the technology is there at this moment in time. Maybe in 10 years time it might be a completely different story, I don't know. But as I say, this technology we were looking at it's almost 20 years ago now, and it wasn't quite there then. I still don't think it's quite there now, but I could be wrong. If somebody else has got a different view on this, if somebody else has employ this technology with great benefits, please let me know. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to do like a bit of a grand designs kind of video tour, and you can tell me how well your air source heat pumps and other technologies are working in the property, because I think that's going to be something that, you know, hopefully will grow and develop in the future. So hope that answers that question for you, Stu. Thanks ever so much for sending it in to us. And let's move on to the next question. Question number 4 has come in here from Kay. Hi there, Kay. Thank you for being part of the amazing WiggyWam community and for sending in your question. Kay says, I currently have 1 buy-to-let and I'm considering buying another 2, but after reading about landlords' experiences online, I've kind of been put off. But before I pull the trigger to buy the next few properties, do you think house prices and mortgage rates will continue to fall? And if so, should I wait? Any advice would be appreciated. All right, okay, well, thanks for that question. Interesting that you're looking to go into the residential landlord market when a lot of landlords are now looking to come out, as you've highlighted in your question there. And I think that's being triggered by a number of different things, obviously increasing in number of legislation, bits and pieces that landlords have to handle on a daily basis, but also the swing in balance of power, if you like, more back towards the tenant, which I think has actually undermined the rental market quite significantly. Okay, so the Section 21 no-fault evictions, what I think were actually a very good piece of what's the word I'm looking for? Legislation, for want of a better word. I think it was a very good piece of administration, let's put it that way, between a tenant and a landlord, because it allowed flexibility in terms of landlords being able to gain possession of their property within a much shorter time period if tenants weren't, you know, behaving themselves, or they were causing nuisance problems, or they weren't paying the rent on time. You know, this tool was available to a landlord, and I think it kept the relationship on a fairly even keel. You know, if the tenant behaved themselves, paid the rent on time, then there was no problems in terms of worrying about eviction, because ultimately a landlord wants to, you know, keep a tenant in long term. That's the dream for most landlords. But unfortunately, with that now looking at being phased out, and then, you know, more complications in terms of the eviction process as a whole, it is now causing problems where, unfortunately, what I'm seeing on a lot of these different online forums is that tenants are getting quite smart. They know how to play the law, shall we say. They know how to, you know, put you in a difficult position as a landlord, where you go to evict them for non-payment of rent, and then ultimately you can't get them out because they know the law, and that if your gas safety certificate isn't up to date, for example, then, you know, the judge will throw the case out, and you'll then have to go through the cost of reapplying to go to court, all those sorts of things. That is obviously what's putting a lot of people off. Now, that doesn't mean to say that there's not opportunity where a lot of landlords are leaving the housing market, and I think we're now coming to a crunch point or if we're not there now, we certainly will be very soon. And that crunch point will come around from the overall pressure in the housing market, particularly with regard to rented accommodation and availability of it. Okay, now I think one of two things is going to happen. Either the government is going to start to get on board with looking after private sector landlords a lot better, as it has done over the course of the last maybe 20 years or so. And that will encourage a return of landlords to the marketplace to provide more accommodation. Okay, the second thing that might happen is that larger corporates, i.e. banks, will collect a bunch of properties, and notice I use the word collect there, draw into that inference whatever you want, but they will collect a bunch of properties, and then they will become the major landlords. Okay, now that is quite an interesting proposition. Will the law be more imbalanced in favor of corporates than it is the private individual? Who's to say? I'm not quite sure. But the one thing that you can do to protect yourself, Kate, well, there's a couple of things you can do to protect yourself if you're thinking about going in to become a landlord. Okay. And that centers around buying the property right, and then secondly, around employing a really good letting agent to look after your property. Okay. Now, what a lot of newbie landlords don't do is they don't take the time to go and interview all of the letting agents in their particular market. And this is something that we used to do with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of property investors, the length and breadth of the country. We would go in and interview every single letting agent within a chosen area. Okay. And the point of doing that is because we always found that there was one letting agent that stood out head and shoulders above everybody else. And they had the right knowledge and expertise to keep you on the right side of the law, and more importantly, to handle problems when they came up with tenants. Okay. And because inevitably these sort of things do happen. And that's not to say that all tenants are bad. They're really not. But sometimes there will be miscommunication. Sometimes there will be clashes of interest, shall we say. Other times there will be issues that a tenant wants addressing that aren't your responsibility, perhaps, or that, are maybe a little bit unreasonable. And those sorts of things need to be smoothed out and dealt with. And that's one of the skills of an amazing letting agent. Okay. So the key point is find a really, really good letting agent. But the first point that I mentioned was coming back to actually buying the property right in the first place. And again, unfortunately, when a lot of newbies go into the marketplace to buy buy-to-let properties, they don't negotiate well enough in terms of the buying price of the property. Okay. Now, to give you an example of this, Kay, one of the worst things that I've seen is you get a newbie landlord who goes to an auction, for example, and they see a property they like. Because it's going to auction, they think they're going to get a bargain. So they bid away and they end up paying more for the property, or the same as they would if they went to a local estate agent and bought it, off the estate agent, right? So let's say, for example, that property is £100,000 that the estate agent's asking for, right? So they go and pay £100,000 for the property. Then they go and spend 10, 15, 20, 30,000 pounds in terms of fees, and then doing a refurb on the property. So now their total investment, okay, is 120,000 in that property. But what's it actually worth? Well, it's still only worth £100,000 because that's what all the properties in the street are selling for, right? So now most landlords are then in the situation where they've overcapitalized on the purchase of the property, and it's going to take a long time to claw back that extra £20,000. Okay, now that causes you a bit of a headache because most landlords will sit there and go, well, it's okay, I'll just wait for the market to go up, and that'll get me back my overinvestment in the property. And that's assuming that the market always goes up, which of course it doesn't, and the market can fall. So if the market value falls by 20%, you've actually now overcapitalized by 40%. You've got an extra overinvestment into the property, which is just not worth it. So if you then had to sell the property quickly for £80,000, you've lost 40. Do you see where I'm going with this? Okay, so I know that might seem like a bit of a hypothetical situation, Kay, but my question to you would be, is it not better to buy that £100,000 property for 80,000 or 75,000 or 70,000 in order to then, spend the money on doing it up and then forcing the value of that property up in line with market expectations because you bought a bit of a rundown property that needed doing up and that is then worth more once you spent that extra money on it? And that then protects you because what you're doing is you're building in a discount to the market value initially. So you're building in a buffer of protection so that if the property value does drop by 20%, it doesn't really matter because, you've already built that into your purchase of the property in the first place. So there was quite a bit that I've thrown at you here in this answer, Kay, and you might want to replay this video one or two times just to understand exactly what I'm trying to say to you here. But I do strongly recommend that you buy well and that you get a good letting agent on board. If you're going to be a landlord and go forward and build your portfolio, buying well is number one key in property investment because it just allows you so much more flexibility in terms of, do you flip it on or do you then rent it out? And secondly, the right letting agent will keep you on the right side of the law. I did write a book about this a few years ago now, Kate, and it was called As Safe as Houses. There are one or two copies floating about on the internet. If that's something that appeals to you, grab yourself a copy of that, and that'll educate you a little bit more in terms of the background about buying and selling investment property and help you to start and build and grow your portfolio as fast as possible. So hope that helps there, Kay. Thanks ever so much indeed for the question again, and good luck. If we can help you at all, please let us know. All right. Moving on, question number 5, I think we're at now, is from Rebecca. Hi there, Rebecca. Thanks for being part of the amazing WiggyWam community and for submitting your question here. So Rebecca says, I'm in need of some help. I've been given an opportunity to buy a house with tenants in it, which I think is below market value. If I buy it, I would be a first-time landlord, and I'm already a homeowner, so wouldn't be a first-time buyer. At the price it's been offered, I could just about afford to pay cash for it, but should I do that or get a small mortgage? I know I need a survey doing and valuation, but what else do I need to do to make sure that I'm not buying a problem property? Okay there, Rebecca, thanks for that question. Quite a bit going on there. So it's great that you're looking at this potential investment opportunity, and you want to make sure that you're not buying something that's going to be a bit of a problem or that's going to create more issues and headaches for you once you've actually bought it. So a couple of things I'm going to draw your attention to in terms of this purchase or proposed purchase. First of all, it's the one thing I want you to be aware of is making an allowance for the fees that are involved in buying this sort of property. Okay, so first of all, you're going to be paying likely 3% stamp duty on this. You're then going to be paying for your solicitor's fees, which I would suggest you budget for at least £1,500 plus VAT on that. You're going to need things like your searches in place. Okay, I would definitely recommend you get a protect your pocket costs indemnity insurance in place. You can get that from us if you want to. It's a nominal cost, but it will underwrite all of your costs. So should the deal fall through, you'll get all those costs back. Okay. You may well have mortgage application fees to pay for, and survey fees, etc., etc. All of this can start to add up. So you're probably going to have to budget around about 10 grand for all of your costs. That's in terms of just buying the property in the first place. Then you haven't mentioned this in your question, but then you need to look at, is there any work that needs to be done to bring this property up to standard? Now, if this property is being managed by a letting agent at the moment, then you can go and have a conversation with them to get a little bit of background about the tenants and about their performance in terms of being tenants, and more importantly, whether or not they've actually paid their rent on time every single month to the current landlords. Okay, because that can be a problem that you might inadvertently, shall we say, sleepwalk into if you're buying this property on trust and you haven't done a little bit of background check on the current tenant. So it could be that this person is looking at flogging the property quickly because they've got nightmare tenants in it, and those tenants haven't paid any rent in the last 2 years, and they've run up, I don't know, huge electric bills or whatever, utility bills, and you now can't get them out of the property for whatever reason because there's a legal loophole that they're exploiting that's preventing you from getting them out of the property. I mean, that's like the disaster scenario, right? And in that sort of situation, you don't want to then buy that property for what you think is cheap to then end up in a situation where you are thousands of pounds into fees for going to court and trying to evict these tenants, right? So that's one of the things to be aware of, first of all. What I would suggest that you might want to do is, once you've had that conversation with the letting agent, if everything's okay as far as that's concerned, and you are that they're paying their rent on time, that's obviously a big comfort blanket as far as buying the property is concerned. And then when you go to get your survey and valuation done, the valuation will indicate whether or not the price that you're paying is less than the current market value, which hopefully it is, but we'll have to see. And then the survey aspect of it will indicate whether or not there's any work that needs to be done to it that you may not have been aware of when you've looked at the property, if indeed you have. All right, I would always recommend you go for a home buyer survey plus valuation on a property of this type, depending upon its age. If it's any older than probably about 100 years, I would then look at maybe a building survey plus valuation on the property as well, okay, just to protect yourself in case there's any major issues or hurdles that you need to have a look at. All right. So that would be those would be some of the things that I'd be looking at quite intensely. You also want to check when you're speaking to the letting agent and other letting agents in the area whether or not this is a desirable area for renting. And the reason we ask that question is because you've currently got tenants in it now, but is that property going to be in an area where tenants are going to want to rent again in the future? Because the last thing you want to do is buy a property, rent it out, and then find that you can't actually get tenants for it. And the worst I've heard in these sorts of scenarios is where somebody had a property empty for 2 years because they couldn't find tenants to go into it because it just wasn't an area that was popular with tenants. Okay. So those are the sort of things that I would be looking at from your point of view, and hopefully that's giving you a little bit of insight. In terms of whether you should pay cash or get a small mortgage, obviously the amount of fees you're going to be spending may affect your calculations in terms of the amount of cash that you're going to put into this and the overall purchase price of the property. There may be some benefit for you to get a small mortgage or a bigger mortgage than you think, because if you like the idea of being a landlord, you might then look at buying a second or a third investment property, in which case it might be good to pull your cash out. Now, what you could do in this sort of situation, Rebecca, is if you bought it cash to begin with, you could then maybe do a remortgage in 6 to 12 months later once the relationship's settled with the tenant and you're happy. You could then do a remortgage or a refinance on that property, pull out some of your cash, and then use that for your next deposit for the next property that you're looking at buying. Okay, so a couple of things to think about there, Rebecca. Quite an exciting journey. Again, I did write a book on this, which is called The Safest Houses, which I think there's some copies floating about on the internet. So if you want to have a read of that and plug into that, I think that will help you in terms of the overall things that you want to be looking at as far as being a landlord is concerned. But I wish you all the best of luck with that. And if there's anything else that we can help you with, then please do let us know. All right, so good luck with that one, Rebecca. Thank you. And moving on, so question number 6 here comes in from Charles. Hi there, Charles. Thank you for your question and for being part of the amazing WiggyWam community. So Charles says, I've just had a survey done on a house which has picked up that there's damp coming through the ceiling of the first floor. What should I do about getting some quotes on repairs so I can show these to the seller and the estate agent? I think it's going to be quite an expensive job to fix, and no one mentioned anything about it before I put my offer in. Okay there, Charles. Well, thank you for that question. Interesting that you've had this survey done and you suggest that there's some damp coming through on the ceiling of the first floor. Now, as it's a house and not an apartment, I'm going to suggest that this sort of source of water ingress is either coming in through the roof, which might be an area through the guttering, i.e., gutters are full of rubbish and they're filling full of water, and that water is then splashing back against the property in some respects, or more commonly, which is to do with a defective flashing around a chimney breast or a chimney that's going through the roof. That tends to be where the more common problems congregate at these sorts of nature, which is related to damp problems on ceilings in the first floor. Okay, it's quite common. Sometimes you'll see it on properties where there's yellowing to the ceiling or to the chimney breast itself in the first floor bedrooms, etc. So what I would do is I would just, in this sort of a situation, I'd talk to a timber and damp specialist and I get them to come out and do a paid for survey on the timber and damp elements of the house. Okay, it may well be that the water ingress, the reason I mentioned a timber and damp specialist is because there may well be some problems with water ingress which has caused problems to the roof timbers, and that may not be immediately available, which is why I'm suggesting you have an expert look at it who can look at whether or not there's any fungus growing in the roof timbers, any signs of either dry rot or wet rot starting to take place. That might be a bit extreme. It might just be a few droplets of water that's coming in that's causing this damp issue, but I just want you to be on the safe side so that you're not going to end up in a situation where you're going to have to spend thousands of pounds on doing major roof repairs in the future if this has been particularly problematic. Now, one of the things you could do, Charles, is you could stand further back from the front of the property and use a pair of binoculars and inspect around the chimney breast if there is a chimney coming through the roof there, or inspect the roof itself to see whether or not there's any missing tiles, or see whether there's any obvious signs of missing flashing, or whether or not, which is quite common, the flashing around the chimney is what we would call cement fillets. So sometimes I have seen it where builders have just mixed sand and cement as mortar, and then they've just put a mortar bead around the join line between the chimney breast and the roof, right? And that's fine, because on day one, when they do it, the mortar sticks to the tiles and the brickwork, and so it forms a nice uniform fitting around the chimney breast. But the problem is, over time, is that area is constantly exposed to the worst kinds of weather, heating and cooling, heating and cooling, heating and cooling. And before too much longer, the mortar quickly cracks, and then water gets in behind the mortar and into the roof void there as well. Okay, so you may well see with a pair of binoculars, actually, that is the problem, that there's a mortar, fillet around the chimney breast, and therefore it needs to be replaced with lead or proper lead work. And it may well be that the easiest solution here is to go and ask a local builder for a quote to put flashing in around the chimney breast to do a proper job, and also to inspect the roof space to see if there's any issues with further water ingress causing additional problems. Okay. Depending upon costs here, Charles, a difficult one to give you any kind of steer on in terms of costs. I don't know how big the property is that you're looking at buying. If it was a sort of 2-bedroom terraced house, you might be looking at sort of £400 or £500 to have some flashing installed, lead flashing installed around the chimney breast there. The main bulk of that cost, of course, is access to the property, and if somebody's got to hire a scaffold platform to get up there, and then ladders to do that repair work, that can obviously be quite expensive. So that's the unknown quantity. If it's anything more extensive, i.e. water has been getting in for a long period of time and it's started to affect roof timbers, you could be into a few £1,000s. So get some quotes from a good builder, get some quotes from a timber and damp company, and then once you've got that information, you can then go back to the estate agent and who will then go back to the seller, see if you can do anything on the price and start to bring that back down again, because you need to cover this extra work that your surveyor's found. All right, so I hope that helps, Charles. Any questions or concerns on that, or anything else you want some further guidance with, please do let us know. But thanks again for your question. All right, wonderful. And moving on, question number 7 here this week. We decided to do an extra bonus question. So question number 7 here comes in from Chris. Hi there, Chris. Thank you for being part of the amazing WiggyWam community. Chris's question is, we're first-time buyers and are thinking about putting an offer in on a 3-bedroom detached house. It's quite old and has warm air heating system installed with no radiators. My question is, would it be worth keeping and upgrading it, or is it more efficient to upgrade to a central heating system with gas boiler and hot water radiators? Are there any permissions that are needed for this type of work? And would we be able to negotiate the price based on the cost of upgrading or changing this system? If so, then by how much? Okay there, Chris. Well, thanks for the question. Quite comprehensive that you've got there, and great that you found a property that looks like it could be the one for you. These are quite interesting. I haven't seen many warm air central heating systems, if I'm honest, in all the years of looking around properties, and that's probably 20 plus years experience of looking at different houses. I think they were quite fashionable probably back in the 60s, I think, off the top of my head. Yeah, the whole idea would be that they would blast warm air into the room to keep it warm. But unfortunately, I think the way I look at this sort of a question, Chris, similar to how we looked at the ground source heat pump question earlier, is looking at what the common trends are within the housing industry. And there's a reason why a lot of properties have gas boilers with hot water central heating systems, and that they don't have these warm air heating systems. And I would suggest that really does come down to efficiency. And the whole idea being that if this house has got this warm air central heating system, it probably was okay at the time when it was built, but as time has gone on, greater and better technology has come in the form of condensing boilers and combi boilers now, which are a lot quicker and easier to heat the property a lot quicker. And as a consequence, you'll probably find that if you took a life cycle expenditure for the next 20 years, you'll probably find that your warm air heating system will cost you a lot more over the long term than a traditional central heating system. Okay, so that's just my take on it. I would not want to necessarily upgrade it if it was myself. I'd want to maybe change it for a normal central heating system with a gas boiler. And by doing that, you're going to bring it into the realm of understanding of a lot of future buyers who are looking to buy the property when you decide to move up the ladder. Okay, and it's also, I would imagine, a lot more cost effective in terms of finding the right plumber who can come in and do this work for you without having to have specialist knowledge on a warm air central heating system. Okay, so that would be one thing I'd look at doing. In terms of your permissions that are required, you obviously want to be going to a gas safe registered plumber to install a gas boiler and central heating system. Okay, they should all have their gas safe register number readily available to you. I would always go for 3 quotes on something like this. Okay, so speak to 3 different plumbers in your particular area, ask them about their availability, ask them to provide you with a full quotation broken down as to what each element of the work is going to provide for you. The reason why you want to ask for that is because if they and ah and go, oh yeah, I'm not really doing that sort of thing now, or we're so busy we don't have to provide those quotes, then they're probably not the right person for you. So it's just to get a bit of a steer on how willing they are to work with you and to provide the information that you're asking for here. So just go for a gas safe registered engineer. You can check their number, their gas safe registered number on the gas safe website, just to check that they are legitimate. That is something that happens more commonly than you might believe. So just double check that they are a legitimate person in terms of their technical skills and qualifications to be able to fit a gas boiler sensibly and securely, and so that it is properly vented and that that's not going to cause major problems in the future for you. In terms of the price of doing this sort of thing and then negotiating the purchase price on the property, the couple of things that I would say here, Chris, would center around what's the overall condition of the property in. It sounds to me as though, as it is an older property, it is going to require quite a bit of work doing to it, and therefore it might be priced accordingly. Now, if I were in your shoes, Chris, the way I look at buying these types of properties is that I always start low and then gradually work my way up, but I'll always have a limit as to what I will go to. And the problem I see with a lot of people, particularly first-time buyers, and I'll share this example with you for a friend that I helped or tried to help, shall we say, who was a first-time buyer, and they were buying their first property. And it was quite a funny story, actually, because they looked at this 3-story property. It was a 3-bed townhouse, and it was quite old. And they asked me to go and have a look at it for them. So I went in as a surveyor to look at this property, genuinely to do a survey on the property. And because it was my friend, I was like, okay, I need to do a really good job here because I need to make sure I don't miss anything that's going to cause them a problem in the future. And so I spent quite a bit of time going around the property, doing my sort of building surveying bit of investigating. And what I noticed, one of the major jobs in the property was that I noticed the plaster work had started to debond from the brickwork. Okay, now that is a pretty major job. To be doing this property was probably, I don't know, when would it have been built? 1920s maybe. So quite an older property. And with the plaster beginning to debond from the brickwork, eventually it will start to come away in sheets. Okay, and the challenge was I identified probably £30,000 worth of work to be done to this property that was pretty unseen. The property looked in pretty good order, right? So identifying this sort of 30-odd grand's worth of work, they hadn't taken that into account when they viewed it. And I think it was up for sale at the time. I might be getting the numbers slightly wrong here, but it was up for a sale for about 120,000, I think it was. And they said, well, what would you go in with as your first offer? And I said, honestly, the property's on the market at 120. Its market value is about 130 in really good condition. I'd probably start at 90,000, and as it's a property you're going to live in for the next 10 years, maybe go up to 95. That would be my boundary because there is quite a bit of work that needs doing. and they went in at 90,000, okay, as their first offer, and that was not backed by the estate agent. So their next offer was 120,000, which was the asking price for the property. And I was like, okay, you didn't think to maybe go up in stages gradually with this sort of thing? And it was a clear case of, they'd fallen in love with the property, they wanted it as their home, and as far as they were concerned, if they spent that 30,000 over the next 5 years, that was okay with them. It didn't sit well with me, but then again, I wasn't buying a house, so it doesn't really matter. But in your situation, Chris, the point of telling you that story is that if you're in that similar sort of situation, you've got a head and the heart scenario to weigh up here. So the head is probably saying, well, it needs this work doing to it, and it's blah blah blah, I'm going to be spending this much on it. But then the heart is saying it's the right property, it's in the right location, it's the right size. Because of the work that needs doing to it, I'm able to buy it at a better figure than I would have done a property that's done up. So is it worth taking the hit now and spending that money over a longer period of time to really get what we want in the right area and at the right price? And that is a question that I can't answer for you, unfortunately, Chris, because it does come down to how badly do you want it, and is there any other property available in the area that doesn't need this much work doing to it? It's probably as simple as that, and that you actually like. Because this is one of the things that I've noticed about buying and selling property in the UK, is that there is a lot of properties that are very unique, unless you're in the, shall we say, the new build estates and what have you. Sometimes a lot of properties are very unique, and as a consequence, it's very difficult to find matching properties in better condition or worse condition, and sometimes you've got to bite the bullet. So putting a new gas central heating system in is probably going to be, I don't know, 7 grand, 10 grand, depending upon the size of the property. But then you have to take a balance of that against all the other work that you're going to do to the property, the desirability of that property, i.e. have you got more than one or two buyers after it at any one time, and ultimately what is it worth to you in terms of buying the right property in the right location at the right price. Okay, because just to give you some context on this, Chris, some people will buy a house like that and they'll put an Aga in it, for example. And if you don't know what an Aga is, it's a great big range cooker that's heavy as hell, and is almost on 24/7. And people will buy that and they'll put it in there and they'll love it to bits. Other people will buy that same property with an Aga in it and they'll get rid of the Aga because they go, it's going to cost me too much money to run it, I don't want it. And we're all different, and we're all very unique in our choices of the types of properties that we want and what we're going to use them for. So I hope that's given you some steer, Chris, on what the right thing to do is. Let me know, obviously, if there's anything else that we can do to help and support you in that moving journey. But I think it looks like it could be an excellent opportunity for you. Grab yourself a copy of Home Buyer Secrets if you haven't, because this will probably help you with the negotiation strategy and to give you a little bit more background on what's required as you're going through the purchasing process. So it's not just about landing the right property at the right price. It's then about keeping that deal together all the way through to completion. So hope that helps with you, Chris. As I say, let us know if we can do anything else to help you, and I'm wishing you all the best of luck with that. And it sounds like it's going to be a nice little project for you to cut your teeth on. So good luck. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of today's webinar. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, as always. We're here the same time, same place every week, doing this, answering your property questions as much as we possibly can in the time that we have available. So you can send your questions through to us via email, which is happytohelp@wiggywam.co.uk. That's happytohelp@wiggywam.co.uk. You can also go to our website, which is wiggywam.co.uk. That's wiggywam.co.uk. You can set up a free profile on WiggyWam. You can access an entire catalogue now of blogs, broadcast, news articles, all sorts of things that can help you with your moving journey, including an entire video training suite put together by myself that will guide you through the entire process of finding, viewing, offering on, and buying your next property. Okay, that's an incredible amount of value that we've crammed into that video training suite there. You can also send your questions to us via Twitter. Twitter handle is @WiggyWam_UK. So that's @WiggyWam_UK. And we'll look forward to answering your questions on a future webinar very soon. And if there's anything else that we can do to help or support you in your moving journey, please do let us know. We're here to help. We're here to serve. We're here to do our very best to look after you in your moving journey. And we'll look forward to seeing you on a future webinar very soon. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining me today, and bye for now.